Well, good morning, good morning, good morning.
Morning.
All right.
How's everybody doing?
Let's give people a chance to come on in. There we go. There's Carrie. Good
Carrie.
morning.
Morning, Carrie.
Okay, let me get a swig of my coffee. I love coffee. I love coffee so much. It's just amazing.
It loves you too, Ben.
I know. It's great. Let's give a couple more minutes for people to come on in, and then we will get started.
All right.
Here we go.
Lucas.
Yeah, my favorite type of coffee is just the thicker, the better. The darker,
Yeah.
the better.
You like that?
Like I want sludge.
Yep. Give me motor oil. Get me going in the morning.
I want straight up motor oil.
That's right.
I don't want to see the coffee quickly drip. No, I want to see it slowly come
drip.
out. That's what I want.
You want to be able to eat your coffee with a spoon, don't you?
Exactly. I want to be able to see. I want to be able to see sounds. Okay. Okay. I want to be able to see sounds and hear colors.
There you go.
All right. We're doing good.
All
right, so today's video, we got the title is pretty straightforward. Pray for your enemies. This is a topic that is made very clear in Matthew. We'll go over that verse here in a little bit. But yeah, before I get into the actual current content, Joel, what are your initial thoughts on that classic verse in Matthew when Jesus was telling everyone, hey, here's a newsflash for you guys. This is not verbatim. Jesus was telling everyone, hey, people have been told you, attack your enemies, hate your enemies, and love your neighbor. But I say to you, love your enemy and pray for those who persecute you. What are your initial thoughts on that simple but powerful verse?
It is simple. And like everything else that Jesus done, either in the spiritual realm or the earthly realm, it was just turning things upside down and turning things over. And just the fact that we have enemies, and like Ben and I were talking before the show, I don't have any. I don't think I have any enemies, any people that really, in the classic sense of an enemy. Like back then, enemies were a very real thing. And actually, we had years ago, my wife and I, for a summer, our family took in a Ukrainian orphan and a 12-year-old boy from an orphanage in Ukraine. And there is no worse place in the world than a Russian or Ukrainian or Eastern European orphanage. And this kid was such a tough kid, cutest kid in the world. But he was just hard as nails. And he said, one of the things he said was, I don't have any friends. We asked him about his friends. He goes, I don't have friends. All I have is enemies. And I thought, wow, that was, and I thought, that's a world that we don't know, I guess, in the West now. Mm-hmm. But up until 150 years ago, that was everybody's reality. So, but the idea of having that situation with someone, having, a person, an enemy, which is your actual enemy, who will fight you, who will try to kill you, is something that I'm not sure that we really can understand the depth of how radical that is and how revolutionary that is for Jesus to say that.
Sure. So. Well, we all know Jesus Christ was an absolute rock star and a rebel. But here's the thing. Yeah, put yourself in the shoes of the people listening to him in that time period. You're living in a Roman-occupied area. At that time, the Roman Empire was the most powerful empire in the world. And here's this rebel not just against the Romans, but against the religious leaders at the time. This guy is staying up there saying, hey, I'm telling you, love your enemy. Pray for those who persecute you. Just think about that for a second. Like, put yourself in the shoes of that Ukrainian kid. I don't have any friends. I only have enemies. Like, I can't even begin to fathom what life would have been like living under Roman occupation, or being told by religious leaders, this is the way you must live. And out of nowhere, this random guy from Jesus of Nazareth, a random town that is a backwater town, is coming out of nowhere saying, hey, I'm about to blow your minds.
Right.
So it's, bring it to modern day. This is a topic that, of all the things that we as Christians grapple with, in my opinion, I think this is the hardest thing for us to really truly understand. And I'll admit, I'm still trying to figure some parts of it out in my current life. But I figured we could connect it to Trump's recent foreign policy tour throughout the Middle East that he just finished. We can connect it from that, the progress that was made from that, the progress he made with the Russian-Ukraine conflict, and the recent thing he did to the South African president in the Oval Office. I'm not sure we got caught up on that. We'll cover all of it here in a minute, but we can cover all of that to the topic of loving your enemies, praying for those who persecute you, and then bring it full circle back to our own lives. All right, you ready?
Ready. Let's
do it. Get this video pulled up here. This is a quick little video from my boy, Victor Davis Hanson. And it's just a short little bit at the beginning of his video. So this is talking about Trump's recent foreign policy successes. Here we go.
Donald Trump just wrapped up a very successful tour of the Middle East Gulf states. He took that occasion of being overseas, quite irregular, to blast the prior administrations. I think he was talking specifically about the George W. Bush administration as a faulty foreign policy administration. What he's emphasizing is that there is a common bond in the world, and that common bond is in the heart of everybody. They want peace, and they want prosperity, and they want security. What Donald Trump is trying to say is, let's just not get into politics. Let's not get into offending foreign leaders. Just start with a blank slate. We want to help our friends, win over our neutrals, not to lecture them, but to create economic matrices, nexuses in which people find that it's in their vested interest to profit rather than to kill people.
That's why I love his videos. He always starts out his videos with a very brief summary of the rest of his video.
Right.
So before we get into it, your initial thoughts, Joel, over that short little summary.
Yeah, it's funny. I've seen a lot of presidents these days. I was just at a breakfast this morning with our pastor at our church and the men's leadership breakfast, and we were talking about different presidents and how they did things. And he mentioned, we were talking about Jimmy Carter, and then who was worse, right? Mm-hmm. Was it Biden or was it Jimmy Carter? And I said, no, the guy that trumps them all is Lyndon Johnson. And but because not only did Lyndon Johnson give us a great society, he gave us Vietnam, and Kennedy started messing around Vietnam, but Johnson went full in, and he gave us that. And the Vietnam War was probably the worst thing that's ever happened to this country. And it didn't even happen to us. But but there's always a doctrine with, somebody was saying this last night when I was kind of catching up with everything. By the way, I've been on vacation all week for those you don't know. So I've been brought up this topic and I'm like, I've been on the beach snoozing, watching the
Life
dolphins
is really
go
hard
by
for you, I know.
for about 3. I know. Sorry. Pray for me, but pray for me because I'm back. I now have to come back to reality. So, but somebody's saying every president wants to have a doctrine, like a foreign policy doctrine. So, the Bush doctrine or the Reagan doctrine or the, God forbid, the Jimmy Carter or Barack Obama, right? Doctrines or whatever. Trump, I don't know that has a specific doctrine. He's just kind of going to these guys making deals, and saying, hey, let's try win-win here.
Maybe that is the doctrine. The deal
the win-win. Yeah. Hey, why are we wasting all this money and time and human resources and lives on these stupid conflicts? We could both be prospering right now. Anyway,
Right.
to the Middle East and say, hey, instead of it takes guts. It was kind of like a JD Vance going to Europe and saying, hey, the problem is not, the problem here is you guys, we're paying for your
Right.
security and you're kind of undermining everything we sort of supposed to stand for, So it's, and Trump goes to the Middle East and say, hey, instead of exporting terrorism, why don't you export, so you got a funny sound, but coming through.
I'm sorry, that's my keyboard.
Oh, is it your keyboard? Okay.
Sorry about that.
So, but it's kind of the way he does everything. He's a transactional guy. He's a deal maker. And that's what's thrown everyone for a loop with him, because this is not how we're supposed to do politics.
Right.
It's just
Bingo.
not. And the political animals are, what's he doing? He's doing what the rest of us do every day. We live in the real world.
He's not a politician.
Yeah, we give and take, and we find a way to do it. We find a way to get it done. That's what he does.
There was a meme I saw recently, which was hilarious, but it's very telling. And the meme is basically like, it was like a picture of a random person looking in admiration to the government swamp being toppled. And the left is like, what are you doing? Why are you so happy? And I'm like, this is what I voted for. This is exactly what I voted for. I want the government to bleed like a stuck pig. I want endless wars to stop. I want money being put into my pocket and not yours. It's this rebellious way of leading our country compared to everyone else. And that's the whole thing. Love him or hate him, Trump is not a politician. He never has been. Trump has always been a businessman first and foremost. And so if you've done nothing but business your whole life, and all of a sudden here you are, you're put into the world stage and you're told, create a foreign policy doctrine. From a business perspective, it's like, oh, okay, well, how about we stop wasting money?
Yeah.
Right? How about we stop these stupid money-wasting ventures? And how about we actually make a deal that can benefit everyone? And of course, the left is going to scream and yell and say, yeah, but there are enemies. Trump was like, so? You have enemies in business every day, and you still have to get the job done.
Well, and you got to have the right, I don't know about enemies, but adversaries probably is a better.
Fair.
I mean, Obama gave $150 billion back to Iran in sent crates of cash to Iran. And that's like, well, I thought if you're screaming that, hey, these are our enemies, you just gave the world's biggest threat in the world, other than China, I guess. Your guys throw money at them. And like you said, and creating wars, so it's all backwards, like everything else, else in the political world and in the progressive world, whatever they throw at you is usually what they're guilty of. So,
right. And so what's so interesting about Trump's recent tour around the Middle East is he didn't echo what's been said time and time again. Obviously, we don't have time to go into his whole speech he gave at Riyadh, I believe, in Saudi Arabia. His whole main point was, look, you guys have your own culture. You have your own society. You have your own civilization. You have your own thing. How about instead of me telling you how to live your life, how about you live the life you see fit? But we will partner economically. And as Victor Davis Hanson said, if we can create common ground on the economy, that can prevent future wars. That can prevent future bloodshed. And again, whether you agree or disagree, the truth is, when you look at how Trump was treated when he entered these Middle Eastern countries, he was treated like a king. Whereas Biden went over and he was treated like a joke. They didn't respect him. And let's be clear, these Middle Eastern cultures are definitely our enemies. They are not our best friends. They definitely are our adversaries. And as Christians, they're enemies. But then again, it's like, if you are in this position of leading a country like ours, what do? Do you choose the side of endless wars and fight for dominance? Or do you choose the side of, hey, listen, we will defend ourselves against people who hurt us, and we will take out some really bad people, sure, but we're not going to fund these endless wars? What side do you choose, you know? And so, anyways, I know this is a big topic, but I guess the summary of what I've been seeing is I've been seeing Trump see adversaries, see what could be our enemies, treat them with trade, treat them with deals, tough deals, but treating them as like, yo, we don't need to constantly kill each other. We can find peace somehow. I may not like you, we may not respect each other, but we can at least find common ground. Let's do that. That's what I'm seeing. What are you seeing overall with Trump's deal doctrine?
Well, in some sense, I agree with you. I know that I don't know how this is different than like Richard Nixon going into China and opening up China and thinking, or putting McDonald's in Moscow and thinking, well, if we just economically, if we partner with them economically, they'll eventually want to be like us. They'll eventually want freedom. They'll eventually be our friends. I don't know. Trump doesn't seem to have the naivete that maybe a Jimmy Carter or even Nixon had on this kind of thing, or George Bush the second, when he went into the Middle East with a war to liberate these people and said, everybody wants freedom. No, everybody doesn't want freedom. They don't.
Right.
A lot of people want, like, I think Victor Davis Hanson used the word security. Everybody wants security. They want to be taken care of. Some countries have never known anything but a brutal dictator, so they want a brutal dictator. So I'm not really sure. I'm gonna have to wait and see how it plays out. But the world is just a tricky place, and you got to have your eyes open whenever you go in and make deals with people, because in the Islamic world, they may be all friendly. They may treat Trump like a king, but that doesn't mean that they're not looking at us. So much of the Arab culture and other cultures in the world are like, hey, put up a front, bring your enemy closer. Bring your enemy closer, make your enemy so you can, so instead of having to shoot him where you might miss, you can shiv him, up the rib cage because he's right there, whatever it is. So you can't be too naive on this kind of thing either, and realize that this is geopolitics. World geopolitics is a nasty game.
Well, the good news is you and I, and no one in the chat, from what I'm assuming, is in charge of global politics. But we are in charge of ourselves and our walk with Christ. So let's transition here. Can you see that okay?
I can, yes. Uh-huh.
So this is a lot, but what we'll do here, if you can do me a favor and read 43 through 45. Can you see that?
Yeah.
Okay.
You have heard that it was said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say to you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, that you may prove yourselves to be sons of your Father who is in heaven. For he causes his sun to rise on the evil and the good, and sends rain on the righteous and the unrighteous.
And I'll finish up. For if you love those who love you, what reward do you have? Even the tax collectors, do they not do the same? And if you greet only your brothers and sisters, what more are you doing than others? Even the Gentiles, do they not do the same? Therefore, you shall be perfect as your heavenly Father is perfect. And that was Matthew 5:43 through 48. At the surface level, it's very easy for us as Christians to just say, oh, yeah, totally. Yeah. Love your enemy, pray for those who persecute you. Yeah. Cool. But when it gets down to the nitty gritty, in our lives, we've all had people in our lives, whether in the past, currently, who we would have considered our enemies, or people who are so opposite than us that we don't want to be near them. And we've been persecuted before. Me personally, my boss at my old school, she was definitely my enemy. It got to a point where she went from an ally to an enemy, and she directly did everything in her power to attack me in every way, to get rid of me, to force me out of that school. And that's a much deeper story. But I'll be honest, it took me a very long time to recover from that. I can talk about it now and be fine, but just like, it was one of those situations where it's like the last thing I want to do is love her. The last thing I want to do is pray for her. But I to be honest, I would say after like a year, I finally was able to get to a point in my life where I could say, you know what? She did what she did. Did it hurt? Absolutely. Was it traumatic? Yeah. But I got to a point in my life where I found peace. She did what she thought was the right call. As crazy as it was, she did what she thought was right for herself. And it's one of those things where if it's like your boss or someone closer in your family, everyone has to come to a point where they have to understand what Christ actually said, not what we wanted him to say. We wanted him to say, love your neighbor, hate your enemy, but that's not what he actually said. And so that's my personal connection to this. Joel, have you had anyone in your past that maybe not enemy, but someone who definitely would fit the category of someone who persecuted you?
I suppose so, yeah. And I was thinking, I used to have a pastor who would preach a lot about this and say, he would talk about your enemies, love your enemies, and how don't pray that God, don't try to destroy them, let God take care of them. And I just thought, who's enemies? I don't, this is, I just can't imagine them having enemies, but people, I guess in the old sense, the enemy is someone who wanted to hurt you or kill you. But now it's someone who, everything, our society is so civilized compared to what, Western civilization, Judeo-Christian civilization is so much more civilized, than this is a little window in time we have this, where we have an incredible time of peaceful interrelationship with everyone. That's always hanging by a thread, right? It's just a miracle that we can deal with each other and have differences and not be at each other's throats with bloody swords in our hands, right? So that's another reason why it's hard these days, because we can't really define a lot of things, like what really is our enemy. I mean, I've had people, I guess, persecute me. I've had certainly in my business dealings in the last 5 years, I've had
Mm,
a couple of the worst business dealings I've ever had.
mm,
And I got to actually, my last real estate transaction that I did, I actually had a couple people act unethically, and it hurt me
mm,
very badly. So, but
mhm.
that's about as bad as we're going to get it in our society now. If, you know, I suppose, you know, there are anti-Christian, especially anti-Jewish, that talk about the Jewish couple that was killed in DC that I read about.
Oh yeah,
So
yeah.
that's kind of the world that Jesus was in is kind of, we're seeing little snippets of it these days. Or like, you know, when we go to these wars and we find out, a neighbor of mine did 5 tours in Iraq and
Mhm,
Afghanistan, and he says, no,
mhm.
you don't even know what a bad society is like. Go to
Right.
Afghanistan, see what that's like there. Um,
Mhm,
so, but with us, it's just more the people that have harmed us financially or personally or in some way. You know, they've
right.
denied us something that we wanted, which really is a testament to how this kind of our Western civilization has really integrated this teaching through all the
Mm,
centuries to now the
mhm,
worst thing we could say is, oh, that person got me fired, or that person cheated me on my business. You know, well, was there bloodshed? Was did you know? Well, that's the way the world of the world usually, but it's because we have this Judeo-Christian culture and this Protestant ethic, or whatever you would want to call it, that's been so redemptive, that these words of Jesus they really have been weaved into our society. We just don't realize it
mm,
until we look at the other world, until we get involved in these wars in these other countries and start, you know, uh, doing what we're just talking about, you know, with not to do. Don't go in and to Iraq and Afghanistan and start a war. Go in
mhm,
with, you know, go with economic incentives and stuff like that. That's what we've been saved from, and yet we keep diving back into it. And I think that's one of the things Trump is doing, saying, "Hey, I don't want to. We have a better way. You know, we don't
mhm,
need to kill each other. How about, you know, like Richard Hansen said, how about you start making money instead of killing people?" Well, that's a very
mhm,
Western idea. That's a very Judeo-Christian Western idea, based on the words of Jesus. So,
mm. Absolutely. One second. Yeah, it's a topic that obviously can take weeks, if not months, to really dive deep into, maybe even years, to fully understand the simple verse of love your enemies, pray for those who persecute you. Because even the word love, what does that word actually mean? Does it mean accept and embrace everything that they do? Or does it mean be mindful, be cautious, but still pray from a distance? Like it's such a
yeah. Doesn't mean you let them
powerful.
walk all over you. Yeah. And yeah,
Right,
doesn't mean you're an enabler. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
right, exactly. So, it's one of those things that I knew could definitely create further conversation. And that's where the whole point of this is, just to encourage everyone here listening or watching us, is like, really take time to think about that verse. Like, really chew on that and think about people in y'all's lives who you would consider adversaries, enemies, people that have persecuted you, and really think
Yeah.
about what that verse means. Not what you
And
want
there
it to
too, like,
mean,
yeah.
what it actually says.
Chloe's got a story of pretty bad stories of someone that actually did. Someone
Mm,
takes a warrant, pulls up a chair, watches you be arrested, writes letters to authorities with lies. So there are, yeah, Chloe, there are still those things that happen because, like I said, as redemptive as Western culture is, it's still a fallen world. Yeah. So some of us have a bigger challenge than others. Yeah. So
right. And no, that's not that's not it. Although I will be watching some pups here in a minute. My mother-in-law is dropping off her dogs, so I gotta go handle that. But Patriots, it's time to go. As
oh, it is. Wow.
always, Joel, it's been a great day. I will not be available next Friday because I will be traveling in California. I will be seeing a friend of mine up in Sacramento. A guy I used to serve with. So I will not be available next Friday. Just want to give you a heads
Okay.
up.
Well, if you're in Sacramento, say hi to Gavin, the governor. That's for me.
Yeah, totally. Super excited.
Send him my love. That way, on our topic today.
Will do.
Send the governor my
Will do.
love.
I will send him my love and your love.
That's right.
All right, boss. Everyone, have a great
All right.
day, Patriots. God's in charge as always.
Yes. Amen.
Okay.
Yeah.
1, 2.